Welcome to the Butterfly Tumblr Radio channel. Are you ready to start today's story? Let's get started. Marital rifts, emotional labyrinths, a soulful journey about betrayal and self-redemption is about to unfold. Imagine, your beloved partner suddenly proposes divorce, and you find that you no longer love her. What kind of experience is that? From the chance encounter in a bar, to the secret affair with a colleague, to the late-night heart-to-heart with a friend, every decision could change the course of your life. Follow me to unravel the layers of fog in this story. My wife had once cheated on me. Once was enough. I'm sure she felt she had everything under control and was shocked by how I handled it. The events that unfolded were very ordinary. We've been married for 15 years, things have gotten rather boring. We grew distant, living under the same roof in different rooms. She withdrew herself from me. At some time, I realized we weren't partners, confidants, or lovers. She dropped too many hints. I investigated and dug it, found out that she had had an affair, at least an emotional one. She began protesting to me. It was routine, and I'd grown tired of hearing her complaints and derision over the years. With this new evidence, I not only heard her but also listened. She wasn't happy with our marriage. She had fallen out of love with me. It seemed obvious to me. If I had sought to bring up the fact that she was wrong, we may have fixed our relationship. I loved her, and we could save our marriage. She would have simply isolated herself from me even more. She just looked at me, and I could see another crack in our relationship. To hell with it all, I said to myself as I finished my beer. I kept thinking about our last argument. I was looking for a method to win her back. After all, she was mine. It seemed I told myself that every time I tried harder to bring my wife back, she drifted further away from me. I stayed up late at night with my wife to sleep in our large family bed, nursing my wounded feelings. Somewhere along the line, my mind kicked in, and a new way of thinking emerged. Why was I arguing with her about her feelings? Indeed, why at that point? I knew that everything my wife had told me was correct. The truth was something I couldn't simply ignore or persuade her out of. She was sharing her emotions with me, and here I was battling with her, telling her she was incorrect and that she wasn't truly feeling those emotions. How foolish was that? How do you tell someone they are mistaken about their emotions? It abruptly came to a halt. She felt exactly what she felt. So why dispute about it? So how was I feeling? Strange, no, it was unusual because as I sat in the darkness on the couch, reflecting on my recent connection with my wife, I realized that I too was unhappy. I was no longer certain that I loved her. I was enamored with the prospect of still being together and married to my beautiful wife, but that wasn't genuine, was it? This insight left me shaken. It took me some time to get everything together, but now I had an action plan. If it worked or not at that point, I didn't care, since I knew what I was doing, and what she was doing wasn't working. What exactly does this mean? Insanity is defined as repeatedly trying the same thing that didn't work every time, so I'm hoping it works this time. I smiled as I tossed my beer bottles into the trash can and chose to sleep in the guest room. It was all part of the plan. Tom, Sarah opened the door to the guest bedroom and turned on the lights, depriving me of sleep. Why are you sleeping in the guest room? I struggled to adjust my eyes to the bright light. I stayed awake late. I didn't want to disturb you, I explained. She looked at me and then shuffled off to the kitchen to get some coffee. I don't drink coffee since I have the capacity to wake up and be awake right away. I went into the shower to prepare for the confrontation today. My step was bouncy. Sarah sat across from me in the living room. I was in my customary position on the sofa. Sarah squeezed your fists. She seemed upset, and I sensed she was ready to say something. Tom, she started, this is not working. I'm disappointed that I lost, and I don't think I love you anymore. I said, and glanced at her. She stopped and then proceeded, Tom, I know we've been together a long time, but I believe we should seek a divorce. The term remained in the air. I smiled as she nervously looked at me. That sounds nice, dear, I said. She blinked. Tom, have you heard me? I nodded. Yes, I heard you. You think it's not working. You do not love me. Do you want a divorce? I agree. So do you understand now? She was perplexed. I stood up and approached her. I kneeled down in front of her. Sarah, I cannot change how you feel. You do not love me. How could I argue against that? Could I inform you that you were mistaken? No, you do not love me. To be honest, I didn't always adore you. If you feel you can't live with me anymore, well, again, how could I argue with that? Sarah looked at me like I was crazy. However, I could tell she appreciated my inability to understand what she said. Wait, you said you did not love me? She asked. There were times when I felt similarly to you. She was slightly shaken. She had been replaying this small scene in her head the entire time. She never expected me to behave this way. I enjoyed seeing how her emotions were reflected on her face. So did I say anything else? I have to depart tonight, so I'd prefer to resolve things now if you don't mind. Are you leaving right now? I stood up and started putting on my jacket, preparing to depart. Oh no, Tom, where are you going? I am leaving. I believe I will hit a couple bars. I suppose I'll start looking for someone else instead of you right now. I waved farewell and left her sitting in the chair, her mouth gaping. I opened the nearest bar. There I ordered a bourbon and sat at a table distant from the bustle. I got out my phone and started another section of my strategy. I called a co-worker, Emily, who worked in my department and was well known for spreading corporate gossip. Playing the character of a poor abandoned spouse, I solemnly told her about my talk with my wife, particularly how she had startled me with her plea for a divorce. I contacted her for the wrong reason. I was in the bar drowning my sorrows in whiskey, and I might not show up for work the next day. I could hear the wheels churning in her mind. Emily and I had occasionally flirted at work, and she was unmarried. The next thing I remember is Emily inviting herself out with me for the evening, claiming to look after me and be the friend I needed at a time when I was so vulnerable and emotional. I met Emily at a bar where I knew my wife and her friends frequently went. Was I worried that someone may see me? You are aware that my marriage appears to have ended. My wife did not love me, and I did not love Sarah at the time. Emily looked great. She arrived fast, dressed nicely and seductively, possibly hoping to reach me before someone else did. At least it is what I would like to believe. But when she saw me, she was startled because my body language and mood did not correspond to the information I had given her over the phone. My smile did not help either. Tom, what's happening? She inquired, sitting beside me with a perplexed gaze. I raised my hand and pointed at my ring finger, which was now bare. She wants a divorce. This is how she feels. Why should I oppose it? I called the server over and asked for another drink. Emily ordered her normal cosmopolitan. Tom, on the phone, you appeared more upset, she said. We've been unhappy for a while. I eventually understood that I may not love her as much as I once did. She wants the divorce, so you know what? I'm not going to resist this. She wants to leave? Fine. I am not going to lie there forgotten and neglected. Emily took a long swallow of her cocktail, then stared at me. Now I understood I was having an impact on this woman. Whatever my attitude, I could tell it was puzzling her. Perhaps we should dance? I didn't wait for her reaction. I simply grabbed her hand and brought her to the dance floor. Tom, what are you going to do? I held her close to me. I'll give her whatever she thinks she wants. I am going to do whatever I want. Right now, I want to dance with you. In fact, I've wanted to dance with you for a long time. She glanced into my eyes and smiled. If you want to get back at her. I raised an eyebrow. Maybe. She pushed her entire body against mine. I'm feeling comfy and toasty. I'm fine with that. She exhaled. We lost track of time. It was so lovely not having to call home to let Sarah know when I'd be back. Emily was entertaining and intelligent, and we flirted all evening. She was totally mine. She knew it. I knew it. But I did not take her home with me. It felt great to know that someone desired me. My wife had injured my ego, but Emily had strengthened it. Furthermore, I believe Emily was a more lovely woman than Sarah. We kissed in the parking lot near her car. I opened the door for her and smiled, "See you tomorrow at work." She nodded. I made it plain that I needed to have some fun right now and was not about to commit to another woman. You might not be so subtle. Emily knew I was now searching for someone for myself. I'm confident that by the end of the day tomorrow, all of the ladies in the organization will know about it. I'd want to inform you that I'm a calm man. To be honest, I was excited to rub this in Sarah's face. Where have you been? Sarah snapped at me as I entered the house. She was in bed, but as soon as she heard me enter, she rose to greet me. I put my coat in the closet and began to undress for bed. I went outside, I said. I told you that I was going. Why should you care? Tom, I was terrified you'd do something horrible to yourself. I smiled at her. Sarah, I understand how you feel. I'm fine with it. Do you desire a divorce? I would gladly offer you one. I don't want to force you to live with someone you no longer love. I took my pillow and clothes for the next morning and went to the guest room. Tom, Sarah cried out cautiously. I stopped transferring my belongings to the other hand. What she looked down, she could face me. I do not comprehend. I mean, you do not have to sleep in another bed. Are you saying you'll sleep in another bed, move out of our bedroom? I didn't want to make things easy for her. She gasped, wiping away a tear. Fine, I did not intend that. I mean, you can share my bed, that is if you choose to. If you do not want to, so I think I could move to another room. She was nervous. She had never considered truly moving out of her bedroom before. She held her breath, terrified that I would make her do precisely that. I spared her misery. Okay, this bed is more comfortable. I'll remain with you if it's not too much hassle. Her expression brightened. Oh yes, that would be great. I mean, that is not a problem for me. Then it settled. I said, tossing the pillow back on the bed. She wanted to talk, but I was exhausted and advised her to go to bed. We will not have time to chat later. Indeed, by the following evening, 3 ladies at work had made approaches on me. I even had a friend offer me his sister's phone number. She was a widow who had struggled to find someone to date. I scheduled dates for the coming week with all 4 women, including one with Emily. I kept this evening clear since I needed to speak with Sarah. We needed to sort things out. I think she needed to lead her own life. I got home and faced Sarah. Laura noticed you last night at the pub. She mentioned you were with a woman. Who the hell was she? What did you do together? Laura noted you two appeared to be extremely comfortable together. I could have erupted on her. I could have yelled at her, labeled her an easy woman for hanging out with men, ignoring me and moving away from me, but I didn't. I smiled and informed her that I'd answer the questions after I changed. She attempted to challenge me, but I ignored her and went to change into my own clothing. Once comfortable, Sarah was staring at me intently. She was ready to battle. Her eyes were closed to tears, but her body was stiff with rage. It was Emily from work. I informed her. I did not refute it. I'm sure she expected me to start making excuses, but I did not. What did you do together? She asked accusingly. I looked at her and simply said, "You're on a date." Are you on a date? She screamed. I nodded and proceeded to speak gently. You have no rights. We are married. What makes you believe you can achieve that? I rose up, took a drink from the kitchen, and then sat down again. She remained standing, peering closely at me, waiting for my reaction. "Why should this affect you?" I asked. She looked at me, jaw dropped. "We are married. Do you desire a divorce? Don't you?" She nodded, uncertain of her voice. "You claimed you didn't love me, correct?" I said. "I am not in love with you." She corrected me. "I agree with you, Sarah. You are no longer in love with me. So why shouldn't I look for love with someone else? Do you desire a divorce? You do not love me. What reason do I have to stay with you?" She sat down and slumped into her chair. "What will the people say? Don't you know what that looks like? Laura is now spreading rumors around town that my husband is dating a trashy lady." I hissed, "Don't ever call Emily a trashy lady. She was a perfect lady, and I was a gentleman last night. She intentionally went on a date with a married man." I referred to it as a promiscuous woman, so I shouted aggressively, standing up and pacing in front of her. So I yelled aggressively, standing up and pacing in front of her. "She is not married, and if she is a promiscuous woman, what do you describe a married lady who intentionally dates other men without her husband's knowledge?" Sarah was staring at me. She was speechless. I could see her mind working. How much does he know? She went into a panic. "What's that got to do with me?" she exploded. I simply gazed at her. Time seemed to stretch indefinitely. I stayed mute. She noticed it on my face. I could tell her body was starting to quake again. "How much do you know?" "Enough," I shouted. "I don't care if you slept with them or not. You understand, my dear, when you decided to end our marriage, I knew it was over. I am not going to cry about it. I am moving on. I am going to take care of myself, considering that I have no assistance from my wife at home." I got up and went into the kitchen. Dinner was not ready. I chose to make something for myself. She could cook for herself. She then entered the kitchen and watched me complete my food. "I'm extremely sorry," she told me. I put away the dishes and turned to face her. "I'm sorry too. I think you should be aware that I have plans for the remainder of the week, so don't expect me home early. If you'd prefer, I can sleep in the guest room." She did not respond. I went upstairs to bed. I chose to sleep in the guest room. I'm sure Sarah had a restless night. I met Anna after work. She was a sweet blonde, around 35 years old, divorced, and mother of 2 children. We talked over coffee and then did something very foolish. I took her to play laser tag, a team game that uses safe laser weapons and sensors to track strikes. Yes, it was 2 adults versus 10 teens who all ganged up on us and continued to annihilate us as they had at the beginning of each game. Anna enjoyed it. I enjoyed sitting and conversing with her after we've been murdered, waiting for the next round to begin. During the final game, we were both killed, so we collapsed side by side and feigned to die. I drew her close to me while we were lying there and kissed her. She kissed me back. Then we had a lovely supper, and now I want her to go back to her place where we kissed goodbye. She said her goodbyes before we kissed, and she made me promise that I would ask her out again shortly. I readied myself for another fight with Sarah when I returned, but she appeared calm. "Hello," she said. I smiled and greeted her as I undressed from the date. "It appears you had a fantastic time," she informed me. Her emotions were hidden. "That is true. Thank you for noticing. How was your evening?" We spoke for the first time in months. We sat down and spoke till late in the night. I listened to her, and she listened to me. I'd never had intercourse with anyone else, Tom. "I swear to you," she admitted. I kissed a few males and discussed my feelings with Justin at work. He wanted more from me, but I wasn't prepared. "Sarah, I am certain we are both too responsible for this. Even though you did not have sex with anyone else, you still deceived me. We were a team. I'm grateful you didn't cheat on me before asking for divorce. I genuinely admire you for it. I should have listened to my feelings rather than disputing with them. Yes, she agreed. We sat silently for a while. Tom, I am confused right now. I'm not sure if I want a divorce. I smiled. Let me know when you figured it out. I'm not kicking you out of the house, and I do not intend to leave anytime soon. Tom, I was already awake and going to go to bed. Were you still planning to see Emily? Yes, I am currently seeing both her and others. Do whatever you want to do. Figure things out. I need to do what's best for myself. If we end up divorcing, it was not meant to be. I went to the guest bedroom. She followed me and paused in the doorway. Tom, as I removed my shirt, I turned to look at her. Please come back to bed. I paused. Do you think that is wise? Tears ran down her face. I do not know. I just want you now. I stretched out to her, and she threw herself into my arms sobbing. She was perplexed. She wasn't sure how to feel. I carried her back to our bed. I hugged her while we fell asleep. Danielle was a good buddy of mine. She was a fan, and we frequently discussed the latest TV series and fandom topics. We were in a nice bar with live music, which she wanted to go to, but none of her friends or companions were interested that evening. I took her with me. It was enjoyable, and while we had flirted at work, there was no connection between us as romantic partners. We had a great time, but we were only friends. That was enough for the both of us, and I arrived home early. I arrived at the house to find a car parked in the driveway. My jealousy flared up briefly, but I quickly calmed down and reminded myself that this would never happen. Happens, there is no point in worrying. I heard this from my psychiatrist while undergoing treatment for my phobia of flying. Instead of worrying and thinking, oh God, I'm about to board a plane, he made me switch to an enthusiastic, anticipating tone, God, I'm going to board an aircraft. I cannot wait. It took some experience, but it generally worked in the near run. Given the uncertainty of what to expect, I repeated my chant and opened the door to discover Sarah seated there, speaking with Laura, one of her friends. Tom, I didn't expect you to return so early, Sarah said. Laura's eyes flashed daggers at me. She said nothing. The work was finished early, so here I am. Do you need some privacy? Sarah and Laura exchanged looks. Laura then rose off the couch. I should go. Sarah, I will chat to you soon. Laura gave me a scornful look, said nothing, and then left. I apologize for intruding. I did not mean to interrupt your evening, I spoke to her. Do not be stupid, Tom. This is your journey from home to home. When was the last time she lived here? Have you eaten? She asked me. There were leftovers from what she and Laura had presumably shared. I poked at the food as she was busy cleaning up the kitchen. How are you? I asked. She sat down. I'm fine. I believe I asked Laura over to discuss, but she simply puzzled me further. How is this so? She wanted me to throw you out, change the locks, and divorce your ass. My key still works, therefore I assume you didn't have time to call a locksmith. She laughed. Do not be silly. I had to tell her that I was the one who asked for the divorce. What rights do I have over you now that I've told you this? I peered deeply into her eyes. That last bit was a question she dearly wanted answered. I wanted to leap up and calm her anxieties to assure her that I still belonged to her, but I didn't. I said nothing. In the past, my assurances would have driven her away. Perhaps this new non-committal approach will have a different effect on her. Shifting the subject, I blurted out, I am afraid I have some awful news. My planned date for tomorrow night has been cancelled. Now I am stuck with concert tickets. Maybe you'd rather go with me than another girl? Her expression brightened. Oh Tom, I'd love to. I mean, if you want. I shrugged. So I could offer these tickets to someone at work. No, she replied firmly. I mean, I'd be thrilled to go. Do you want to travel with me? She flushed and nodded. Are you certain? I asked. Yes, she whispered. I smiled. This may be fun. I broke the news to Rachel. She is disappointed, but that is life in the dating world. Sarah was dressed and ready to go when I picked her up from work. She looked nice. She dressed to impress. I was pretty sure she dressed that way to impress me. I knew little about this band. Rachel had suggested we attend this concert, so I purchased the tickets. They were good, loud, but excellent. I wasn't shocked when you ran into Rachel. Sarah was taken aback by Rachel's beauty, and she realized she would have been my date tonight. I apologized to Rachel, who looked at Sarah. Rachel, this is Sarah. Sarah was meant to be my date tonight, but something happened. When I introduced Sarah, I always addressed her as my wife. This time I chose not to, and Sarah noticed immediately. Rachel, it's wonderful to meet you. I am Mrs. Donaldson. She stared Rachel directly in the eyes, and something happened between the two women. Rachel was thoughtful enough to apologize and mention that she had seen me at work the next day. Sarah was fuming with rage. Tom, where's your wedding ring? I shrugged. At home. I took it off when you requested a divorce. I don't need it anymore. Sarah was again at a loss for words. To be honest, I enjoyed the rendering process, I said. Sarah, we haven't divorced yet. I smiled and focused on the music. Several times I went to the bar to refill our glasses. Sarah was always keeping a close eye on me. Every time I was in the bar, a woman would approach me, and we would converse. I laughed once, and she did not give me her phone number. Sarah saw everything but said nothing. Actually, I am not a women man. I can flirt occasionally, but I've always been respectful and never pushy. After Sarah requested a divorce, I freed myself to be free. I learned I had a fairly blunt way of flirting, and now that my control was gone, I realized I didn't have to hold back. I wasn't the most attractive person around, but I was always clever, and I discovered that ladies like my sense of humor and candor. Sarah noticed me doing something for the first time in a long time. I believe it astonished her, but she must have recognized that the same tricks, movements, and flips had previously captivated her heart. Tonight, I believe she recalled exactly that. She remained silent all the way home. I too was mute. When we arrived home, we proceeded to prepare for bed. Tom, where's your wedding ring? I pointed to the sock drawer in the dresser. She walked over and opened it. She reached in and pulled the gold ring out. She stared at it and then at me. The weight of the symbol impacted her, causing her eyes to well up with tears. It is yours now, I told her. I believe you should toss it away or sell it. She stared at me. What shall I do with it? She asked hesitantly. I believe whatever you want. The ring symbolizes our love for each other and our marriage. It was once used as a shield, signaling to others that the wearer was unavailable. I really doubt that most people understand and comprehend what this symbol means. I know that this ring helped me avoid other women. I hope your ring does the same for you since you opted not to live with me anymore. I believe I no longer require this emblem to protect me. It just reminds me of who you used to be. I looked her directly in the eyes until she met mine. When the time comes, you can decide what to do with this ring. I approached her, and your fingers wrapped around the gold band. She watched me and accepted responsibility. Tom, I had just fallen asleep when she called out to me. Thank you for this evening. I really enjoyed the concert and spending time with you. Anytime. I fell back asleep. In the morning, breakfast was awaiting me. Sarah had prepared eggs and bacon. She was a great cook, and I appreciated her efforts. Sarah hadn't taken off her wedding and engagement rings, which caught my attention. I also noticed her fussing with them as she ate alongside me. Laura called me into work that morning. Laura, I'm surprised to hear from you. What can I do for you? Lunch today at 12:30 at Bohemia. She hung up, and I stared at the dead hand, saying I didn't know what to expect for lunch. I didn't know Laura well. Sarah had befriended you at work. She appeared polite, but had never been very kind towards me. She was one of Sarah's pals, and they frequently talked together. I walked into the bar where I had invited Emily that first evening. She was already seated at a table with a white linen tablecloth and waved to me. Her expression was stiff and angry. This talk would probably not be nice. Laura glared at me as soon as I sat down. After my order was taken, "What the hell are you doing? Sarah is in anguish, and you are pulling this ridiculous stunt by dating other women in front of her." For the first time, I felt myself blushing. It was a combination of humiliation and wrath. I hurriedly sealed my mouth to avoid saying something I would later regret. I recognized right once that anything I said or did at this meal would be reported directly to Sarah. She observed as I recovered control over my emotions. I spent a long time thinking about how to answer. Finally, I started to talk. "Laura, how much do you actually know about Sarah's situation?" "I know her husband is acting like an idiot," she hissed. People around us looked our way. Laura quit talking. "Rubbish, answer my question honestly, and I will answer yours." "I have nothing to conceal." "Do you?" Laura swallowed and was pleased when our server brought her food. At that very moment, I sat and waited. "Sarah is confused," Laura said. "She is so confused that she wants to see other men to clear her mind." I replied sarcastically, "We've been trying to help her figure things out, Laura." "This is where I disagree. Why are you and your friends stepping in to assist her sort out her marriage?" Laura was silent. "Really, what is your business? Sarah is my friend, and so what?" I mentioned that I should be her best buddy, her lover, and life companion. "Don't you think she should have talked to me first if she was having problems? Don't you think she should have come to me to resolve things instead?" She turns to her friends who appear to be such decent and responsible people that they take her to places where she can work out her feelings with other men, men who appear unconcerned that they are kissing another man's wife. Laura turned pale. No, she turned quite pale. It appeared that she had abruptly lost her appetite. Laura had somehow triggered my rage. She was just another naive so-called buddy who wanted to interfere in other people's affairs. "Let me ask you a question, Laura. Were you married?" She shakes her head no. "Have you ever been married?" Another shake. "Do you hold a degree in counseling?" No. "So what gives you the right to advise someone on marriage? You have never been married, so how do you know what it is like? What gives you the right to interfere in someone else's marriage?" She gasped, "But I am her friend, and not from where I am sitting." "How many times have you spoken to me, as far as I can recall?" "This happened once or twice. I've been married to Sarah for 15 years, but when have you ever made the time in your life to meet Todd and get to know your friend's partner? I've been in her life for 15 years and know her better than anyone else. You talk about giving advice, you mention helping her get over this. What the hell do you know about me, aside from what Sarah has told you? What is my point of view?" Laura seemed to be on the verge of tears. I had done my best to deliver the message through her. To Sarah, Laura, Sarah expressed to me her desire for a divorce. She said, and I quote, "I don't love you anymore, Laura." Tell me how I should reply to that? What potential argument could I use to prove she's wrong? She wanted a divorce. Why am I unhappy? I hope she changes her mind. I finished the drink. My supper was half eaten, but I was finished. I rose up and gave Laura one final look. I discovered that other women perceive something in me my wife no longer does. She pushed me away. I did not push her away. I will not put my life on hold because my boyfriend is confused and no longer wants me. I'm attempting to move on. It is entirely up to her how she feels about that. I'm no longer attempting to persuade her, tell her how she should feel. Now I can accept it. With that final sentence, I left before Laura could say anything more. I knew as soon as I left the restaurant, she'd be on the phone with Sarah. I had something to think about right then that evening. I planned to meet Janet. Janet's experience was really positive. She differed from the others. She was a younger black woman who was really lovely and attractive. We were really nice and formal when she first joined our organization. However, a few months later, I told some guys a fairly hot joke, and Jay entered the room behind me just as I was about to deliver the punchline. The men around me noticed her and held their breath as I turned to see her stunned expression. I gave her a fairly cheeky smile and said, "He admitted that's very funny." She remained there for a while with an expression that read, "I can't believe this white guy just said that to me," then busted out laughing with me. She was one of the guys from the start, but by the conclusion of my day with her, she had become completely feminine. Janet let me go further than I had on previous dates, and at the last minute, I was the one who turned down her offer to stay the night. As long as there were difficulties with Sarah that needed to be addressed before I could sleep with another lady. "Tom," Sarah inquired as I settled into bed. "Yes, Tom?" "I need you to take a shower." "Why?" It was dark, the light was turned off, but Sarah's voice was breaking. I could hear her sobs. Please, Tom, if you do not take a shower, I will have to ask you to sleep in the guest room." I was perplexed. What's happening? I turned on the bedside lamp to see my wife. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were moist. She couldn't look me in the eye. "Please, Tom, come back to our bed, but please take a shower." "What is wrong?" "I always shower in the morning." "You already know that, honey." She turned away from me. "You smell like her." "Oh, I smelled like Janet." Yes, I got out of bed. I felt terrible. I gazed at her. She was still facing away from me. "I apologize. I didn't realize." "Listen, I can go to the guest room." "No," she sobbed, "I want you to return to our bed." "I am just." "Tom, I can't take the smell of someone else on you. I simply can't." I apologized. "I want you in our bed. It's awful enough knowing you are seeing other people. I can pretend you are out with the guys. I can't stop my pals from telling me who they've seen you with. I could even meet someone like Rachel and convince myself we're just pals, but now I'm certain I can smell her on you. I can tell by I want you to return to our bed, but only after you have a shower. I can't bear your odor on you." I walked to her side of the bed. I did not linger. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "I apologize for being inconsiderate. Let me shower first, then return to our bed." The next morning was Saturday, so I slept in. I'd had a long week of going out every night. I felt my age. I hope I don't get a cold or whatever. Sarah woke me up with breakfast, then she inquired about my plans. "I don't have anything scheduled for this weekend," I told her. "Tom," I was still seated at the kitchen table. "What, Tom?" She reached into her pocket and took something out. She came over and knelt in front of me. She opened her hand, and I saw my wedding band. She grabbed my hand and gazed up at me. "Tom, I began to work on our marriage. Perhaps I did not think everything through." She slowly began putting the ring onto my finger. I allowed her. "I still love you," she kept kneeling, waiting for me to say something. I finally spoke. "Do you actually feel this way?" She nodded. "What, no divorce?" She nodded enthusiastically. "How about other men? Is no one else with you?" There it was. Now came the most sensitive portion. "You might think I'm crazy for doing this, but I went ahead anyway. You must accept that I will still occasionally see other women." Sarah gulped. We sat there for a long time, our gazes connected throughout the process. I discovered something about my wife. I was sure in the outcome. Finally, she nodded. I suppose I'm in love with you too. I told her. I grabbed and kissed her. I kissed her fervently. She kissed me back. Sarah turned out to have low self-esteem. I treated her wonderfully. Well, not exactly true. Over the years, we had grown distant. My worst error was not acknowledging her emotions. Every time she expressed her emotions, I argued with her. Do you realize how damaging that is? How arrogant it is for someone to tell another person what they believe is false? All it did was foster anger and hostility toward me over time. I pushed her until she no longer appreciated her possessions. Actually, perhaps it is my fault. However, as time passed, we evolved. Well, she changed, but I never changed. So why would I want to go back to the way I was? I made a guess. She wanted me to return, but we both had changed. She now realized that there were others behind the scenes who were ready to take her position if she chose to go her own path. Do you truly need to see other people? She whimpered. I don't intend to see other males. I looked at her and grinned. Yes, I will do this from time to time. You may be my wife, but I'm your husband. Remember that, and I will not forget about you. She smiled. Yes, she smiled. Take me to bed and show me all I've been missing. Show me what the other girls got from you. Do you think you have everything I need? I asked. I'll simply show you my affection, and maybe you'll be so exhausted that you won't have the energy for another woman. I scooped her up and brought her into the bedroom. I sat her down on the bed, and we both removed our garments with a frenzied pace. Our need and passion erupted as I took her. She then took me, then she took me again. She learned somewhere along the road that because of my stamina, I hadn't slept with any of the other ladies after 15 years. My wife understands what I can accomplish in bed. For the remainder of the day, she gave a knowing smile. I remained mute. What happened on my dates was not something I brought up, neither did she. It was a period in our lives that was best left behind. From then on, I stopped asking her about the men she had kissed, and my wife now looks at me with regard and respect. I would never have dreamed that my strategy would succeed. It wasn't a particularly good plan initially. I was too stubborn to give her the gratification of seeing her hurt her spouse and request a divorce. When I observed how she reacted and accepted that I was seeing other women while she sat at home waiting for me, I decided to pursue my idea further. I gained her back by keeping my distance from her. What don't you have, you want the most. What you have, you want the least. Those are the words that guide my life right now. We are now closer than ever before because we were both freed. So do I see the others? I have not had two yet. The first clue that Sarah is reverting to her former self will lead to our next date. I understand this. She understands this, and we collaborate to not only listen to each other but to genuinely hear. Here is the next story. I am shocked. My husband ended our relationship because of a foolish joke. Have you ever been in a situation when a light-hearted joke among your friends became out of control? That's what happened to me, and now my hubby no longer wants to see me. It all began with a foolish prank that we imagined would elicit laughter and fun, but as the joke progressed, it crossed a line that we had never intended to cross. Some things are best left as is, since you don't know what will happen. It's so horrible that I opted to commit a childish and reckless conduct solely to make my hubby envious. You know the term, let bygones be bygones. I should have used it, not my spouse, who was not involved in the hoax and was extremely upset and betrayed by my actions, despite my apologies and attempts to make things right. He refuses to even speak to me. It's a heartbreaking reminder of how a careless deed can have major ramifications for our relationships. I never expected that a single joke could create such a schism between us. Now I'm left to deal with the aftermath and try to heal the harm that has been done. I never imagined that one day I would be one of my alpha husband's cruel revenge. You know, when you're too carefree, you wind up doing things that will wreck both your and the other person's lives. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I thought I was just having fun, but apparently, the fun had me instead. A minor error redirected me back to the terrible pit I thought I had fled. I regret the day I made that error. I didn't think my spouse would find out. We were playing a game, just having fun with a few buddies at a party. I didn't realize that what I thought was a game was actually cheating. The worst part was that I had to learn the hard way. My pals duped me into doing things I thought were innocent and entertaining, which ended up ruining my life. I know someone who had a similar experience or was in the same circumstance as myself. How did you pick up the broken pieces and make things right in this situation? I know my hubby is quite sensitive and dislikes foolish jokes, but I went ahead with it. I thought we were all having a good time, but he took the joke personally and reacted cruelly. I deeply regret ever starting the prank game since it has put me in a difficult situation and taken away the love of my life. I still don't know how to make John understand that it wasn't my aim to hurt his sentiments and try to mend our relationship. So I was married to John Johnson, male, 33, female, 33. We initially met at the Cheesecake Factory in Dubai. I'd gone there since I was craving some cheesecake. The Cheesecake Factory is my favorite restaurant, but I'm not sure what happened to the bakers that day because I received a very awful cheesecake, which was a disappointment for me. So I demanded to speak with the manager because the cake tasted like it had been cooked 5 days ago. While I was disputing with the staff, John approached and volunteered to assist me. I informed John of my problem, and he graciously took it seriously and directed the personnel to resolve the situation. I'm not sure if it was my fortunate day at the moment, but everything was going well, and they even gave me a free cheesecake. JN requested my phone number in order to apologize for the inconvenience. I informed him he didn't have it, but the guy helped, so I gave him my number. 3 days later, he called and asked that we meet at a restaurant in Burr Heights. I wasn't sure if I should approve or refuse the request, but I decided to agree regardless. So we met, and we really clicked. Our souls clicked, and we spoke as if we were getting to know each other. He then revealed that he is the genuine proprietor of the Cheesecake Factory. I enjoyed how humble he was and how he treated my situation as a priority when I had a disagreement with the employee about the cheesecake. We started getting along and interacting more over social media, particularly WhatsApp. He was an excellent counselor, an intelligent and personable individual, and all that I liked. The first time we spent time together, was it too early for me to develop feelings for him? I mean, is there a set time range for someone to fall? I didn't know how to disclose my love for the guy, so I chose to just go with the friendship flow, even though it wasn't pleasant having to constantly communicate with this person and occasionally going out with him while knowing you have strong feelings for the man. Our friendship grew deeper with each passing day, even though I had a great crush on him, which I had confined to a small cage. At the very least, we were friends and spent more time together. I wasn't used to Dubai, so he'd take me around to different ice cream shops. There was this weekend when he stopped by my aunt's place and invited me to accompany him somewhere. I didn't question much, so I went with him, only to discover that we were going to Jumeirah Beach residence, which was 35 minutes away from Burr Heights. We were pals for about 6 months before I couldn't keep it together any longer. So, I told JN my feelings, and to my surprise, he is stunned by the bomb I just dropped. I won't lie and claim I wasn't apprehensive when I confessed my everlasting love to John. I was certain I was afraid. We went quiet for a few moments when my mind and emotions had given up hope that he would accept my proposal, but little did I know the person was truly processing what I had told him. So, we kissed, and I froze. I honestly couldn't believe it. Do you know, so that's when our romance began? I didn't regret professing my affection for John. I mean, he was an excellent partner to me. I couldn't imagine having anyone else as a partner except him. Yes, we had our ups and downs, but we were able to overcome everything. JN was a God-fearing man, but I wasn't. However, we respected each other's views and religions. We supported one another and decided to grow old together through thick and thin, darkness and brightness. I love John with all of my being, and I still do, which is shocking given the harm he had inflicted in my life. After a year of getting to know each other, he decided he wanted to grow old alongside me, so he proposed in front of our family and friends. I was the happiest woman alive, and everything was running well. John handled everything for me. We were married 3 months after he proposed, despite the fact that our marriage was short-lived. He made me an honest woman. My memories of John will never fade. We had our fair share of bad and good times. We were deeply in love with each other, that is what I know for sure. The following year, he proposed to me, and I obviously accepted. I mean, I saw the love of my life in him, despite his insecurity, perhaps not, but I adored him. I couldn't see myself with anyone else but him. He was my ride or die, my source of joy and happiness. I fell hard for him, every day aware that my small stupid mistakes would cost me everything, including my love. Was it naive or forward? We married after 6 months. We did not want to rush things, so we took our time planning our dream wedding. I'd moved out of my aunt's house after he proposed. We lived happily ever after, when you know he or she is the one and don't want anything to come between you, which is how I felt. He was everything and more. He had no idea that one day he would be my downfall. A year later, I became pregnant. Our lives were wonderful. I was overjoyed that I was going to be a mom. Not only would I be a mother, but I would also be having a child with the person I cared deeply about. 9 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She resembles my husband so much, and I adored her. She was and remains the best gift God has given me. A year later, I invited my aunt and her husband to my marital house since I was planning a surprise retirement and welcome back party for him, now that he would no longer be working overseas. But when I returned home, I wanted to appreciate him while he was still alive. That man did so much for me. He was the best uncle and father I'd ever had. Both Uncle John and my aunt deserved to get their roses while still alive. During that year, John began acting strangely. He was no longer spending time with me but rather taking our daughter alone and claiming it was a daughter and daddy bonding session. That was a lame excuse because things were no longer fun at home. It was like we were forcing things, even though our conversations were no longer fun and full of happiness. I suspected he was cheating because when I confronted him about his unexpected behavior, he looked at me as if I had grown horns or was insane. So I decided to inspect his gadgets, perhaps he was using them, but I discovered nothing. I knew and felt that he was hiding something from me, but I couldn't get myself to think that whatever he was hiding was genuinely about me. One summer evening, I was preparing for my uncle's retirement party, welcome home party. I had told John that I would be having a party for my uncle, therefore I needed him to be there to help me. He had promised me that he would come home early that day, but he did not follow through. Why was I surprised? Because he had been absent for a few days? He would leave for work early in the morning and return late after our daughter had gone to sleep. When I asked him about it, he said he was busy at work. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. I kept wondering why John was so distant and gone lately. Yes, I found out that he was not cheating, but there was something that had made him too busy for his wife because even our intimate moments were no longer the same. It was as if he was doing it to satisfy himself rather than the two of us. I wanted to find out what his problem was, but I just didn't know where to start. I had thought I knew John, but his behavior showed me that I didn't know him at all. So as the guests were arriving for my uncle's party, my uncle and his wife came, but I noticed that my uncle was a bit off as he tried pretending to be happy. I approached him on the side to chat with him, so I asked him what was going on. I thought he was sick or something, but that was not the case. He had recently opened his coffee shop with the money he received on his last day overseas. About a month later, John returned from work and gave me an invitation to his friend's wedding, so he asked me to be his +1. I had known their friends and their partners for a while, but we were not close at that time because I was still a newbie in John's life. I accepted the invitation, and I knew that I had to find a stunning dress to match with my husband. The big day came, and I looked really fabulous in my dress. I was introduced to some of the groups that I had not previously met, and I do not want to lie, they have a vibe with great energy. Time went on, and John decided to celebrate his birthday by hosting his friends for a birthday lunch. I didn't have a problem with that. I knew that it would offer me a chance to get to meet his other friends and their partners, so I was looking forward to it. John had been a sweetheart at the time, and he was less likely to attend business meetings in a hotel, as much as I had wanted to spend time with John on his birthday, but the bright idea was not a bad one. His birthday came, the friends came, and we were having so much fun. Conversations were flowing, and we stayed together until very late, but we were enjoying everyone's company. The girls came up with the idea of pranking our partners or playing a dare game in which you must reveal your deepest secret or tell us about your life and how intimate your moments with your partner are. I wasn't sure about those ideas, but they sounded fun, so I agreed to participate. Also, Brie, I had no idea that even though we didn't play it on John's birthday, it would get me in trouble. 2 weeks later, a married couple who are John's acquaintances invited us to their 10th year anniversary. I was really happy for them. You know, I had wished that I would also get to 10 years of marriage with John, but I didn't know that it would actually end on the 3rd year of marriage. We respected the invitations and made sure to dress the part and fit the theme. Tom, 36, and Anna, female 34, the married couple, were the epitome of a perfect match. Their love was so precious and pure. I just loved how they loved each other and did everything together. It all started innocently enough, as these things usually do. Our friend group had always been known for its lively banter and humorous pranks, but little did I know that one careless joke would ruin all I held dear. It was a typical Friday evening, and we were gathered in our usual area, Tom's garden, sipping beers and trading stories while laughing freely. Someone raised the issue of superstitions, and that's when it happened, the cause of the mayhem that followed. I came up with a ludicrous concept out of nowhere. Wouldn't it be hilarious if we staged a fake breakup between me and John just to mess with everyone? I chuckled, expecting a momentary moment of amusement, but the notion took fire among our bunch before I knew it. We were all crowded together, contemplating how to make the phony breakup look authentic. We prepared every detail thoroughly, from dramatic social media posts to sobbing phone calls to pals. After the whole affair, Anna reminded us about the activities that we had intended to play when we were at my place. The first breath came to me, and I was dared to tell John a serious joke, describing where he is missing. I knew that was a tough one, but I had to play it. You know, in my head, I was telling myself that it was only a game, and nothing would happen, so I should play. I blurted out that I was no longer enjoying our personal moments because he is constantly weary and occasionally busy, thus I was thinking about pursuing intimacy outside our marriage. The following week, we put our strategy into action. I feigned to be distraught, sending cryptic messages on social media about loss and betrayal. John played along, assuring our worried friends and family members who were unaware of the game. The game was a lot of fun, but I had no idea it was like playing with my marriage because it didn't end well, and I now regret taking the challenge. Initially, it was all in good fun. Our pals fell for the ploy and offered compassion and support, but as the days progressed, I realized the significance of our actions. JN became distant, his once warm and friendly manner was replaced by a frigid indifference. He avoided me and hardly said more than a few words at a time. I tried to dismiss it as part of the performance, but deep down, I sensed something had shifted between us. Finally, one evening, John sat me down for a serious talk. His eyes were filled with pain and sadness as he admitted that he couldn't get over the feeling of betrayal. He couldn't believe I could make a joke about something as sacred as our love. I couldn't understand why he was so fired up because the game instructions were straightforward. It was simply a game, so we were joking, but he took it to heart. We got into a violent dispute over what I said at Anna's place. It even impacted our daughter. You know, the kids can smell tension. My daughter could sense the tension as well, and that was not pleasant. John was really at me. Even if I tried to apologize, he would ignore everything I said. He solely cared about his daughter, and this was terribly hurtful. I even chose to be a stay-at-home parent out of respect for him, as he preferred that I be a housewife, but we had talked about it and agreed that I would only do distant employment, and you decided to commit such an awful deed on me. What have I done wrong to him? I was unable to be a completely present mother to our kid as a result of my sadness and disappointment. John was like a housemate to me because we no longer shared a bedroom and were strangers. days stretched into weeks, then months. So one of those days, John arrived home from work quite early and didn't look well. I asked him what was going on, but he didn't tell me. Instead, he looked at me as if I were the most awful thing he'd ever seen. I was perplexed because I had assumed that we had forgiven each other for the game that occurred at Anna's place, not realizing that the buster had discovered that I had kissed a guy as a result of that game. So, I asked him again, frightened that he wasn't even delighted to meet our daughter. I was wondering what could be the problem. Instead of responding, he simply hurled his phone at me, then he began shouting, and I responded despite him. He shouts like he's reprimanding a child, which generally leads to an argument. When I looked at the phone he had tossed at me, I received the biggest shock of my life. I couldn't fight or refute him because the image in the movie was directly in front of my eyes. I didn't know what to say, and neither do you. I tried to apologize to him, but he wouldn't accept it. He wanted me gone. He told me directly that he no longer wants to see me. I admitted that I had been making him look foolish for far too long. So, I spent the entire week in the hospital due to my mental state. I've been getting sick every now and then just to discover that I had lost my unborn child, which I had no idea about. My thoughts and emotions trembled a day before I was released from the hospital. My husband's lawyer arrived to visit him. He left another envelope, which I didn't examine but carried home the next day. So, once I had settled in at home, I remembered the mail and opened it. The contents of the envelope made no impression on me. My heart paused for a second. The envelope included photos of myself and my male friend kissing each other. It seemed like we were dating. I couldn't comprehend how my spouse had obtained the photographs. I couldn't understand why he would send his lawyer to give the images to me since I saw nothing improper, and in my perspective, kissing was not and should not be considered cheating. I mean, no feelings were involved, it was enjoyable, nothing else. So, when the images were provided, the lawyer contacted again, saying the divorce procedure needed to be finalized and asking to see me and my husband on a specific date. I honored his request and went to meet him and my spouse. The only reason I agreed to the meeting was that I had a lot of questions to ask my husband. One fateful day, the day of the meeting, my husband said that he was divorcing me, citing a lack of trust in me and my faith, failure to be faithful to our marriage. The fact that I sought solace in another man's embraces before leaving him in our home to care for our daughter, I felt he knew that I was grieving and wasn't myself. I tried to defend myself in the image case, but the lawyer warned me that exchanging saliva or kissing another person outside of my marriage is deemed infidelity, even if I had assumed it was a simple friendship kiss. But the fact that I spent time and kissed another person in the guise of friendship is considered, indeed, infidelity. I asked him for forgiveness, I wept and acted like a lunatic, but he just didn't care. I had no idea and never considered it cheating because the guy and I were just friends. I didn't think of him as anything other. I adore my husband, but I suppose the only thing I have never done is honor my wedding vows or him. I didn't know for a time. I was delighted the next day. I was upset by our quarrel about the joke and turned to drink for comfort. The drink compelled me to do something I thought I was doing for fun. I suppose nothing remains in the dark. I felt so humiliated, doing things for enjoyment can lead to our downfall. So, I ended up signing the documents. This meant I was actually letting go of my marriage, a love vows, and family. I asked the lawyer what I would get from the divorce, and he informed me that I would receive nothing other than the house I was living in. So, I requested my husband to unfreeze my accounts, and he confirmed that they were fine. It was simply because they did not have any money. I knew he was insane, but I never imagined it was to that extent. How could he have done such a terrible thing to his child's mother? I had assumed that was all, but he then dropped a huge and devastating bombshell on me, claiming that he was taking full custody of our baby and that I was unfit to be a mother. So, he accepted full responsibility for our daughter. A few weeks later, he filed for full custody of our daughter, claiming that I was unable to be a mother. In addition, he blocked all of my bank cards. I was unaware of this until I attempted to swap the card at the gas station. So, I called my advisor and was informed that my cards had been blocked. When I returned home, I discovered that he had actually stolen my clothing and thrown them outdoors. The doors were secured and replaced, so I no longer had access to the house. Mind you, at the time, I didn't have any gas in my car, so I had no idea how I was going to get home from Denmark Hill. My ex-husband was wicked and psychopathic. I didn't pay heed to the signs. I was deeply in love and believed I had found my soulmate, but I discovered my darkest nightmare and demise. I couldn't believe he did all that just for a bad kiss. It wasn't like I was dating him, but he ruined my life in the name of vengeance over a kiss. A few months later, I had to try to rebuild my life piece by piece. It was difficult for me to start again after what John had done to me. Fortunately, I got a job as a waitress at one of the neighborhood restaurants. It wasn't simple, but I had to try to pick up my life and improve myself. I had no one but myself, so it was time to concentrate on myself and do me. The good news was that John's parents had let me see my daughter and spend time with her every day. I wished that Carmen would visit John. One day luckily it did. All of his operations came to light, and he was jailed. I promised myself I would never fall in love again or develop a crush on anyone. I've learned my lesson. Do you think I handled the issue well, or was I a coward and naive to let John wreck my life in that way? Please advise me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how much pain our dumb joke had caused. I begged for forgiveness, but JK's heart was wounded, and he couldn't trust me again. Our friend's innocuous joke had cost me the love of my life. As I sit alone now, surrounded by the sounds of laughter that once filled our house, I can't help but question if the joke was truly worth it. Take a look. You know when someone says they're drowning in deep murky water? I was that person. I was drowning in dirty water and unable to swim. I turned to drink to find closure when my father divorced my mother. I became just like her at the time. I realized why my mother was an alcoholic. My life had reached a low point. I'd lost the only person who had shown me love and care and given me a lovely daughter. Now I had lost both my daughter and something very important to me, my company. I was miserable and desired to escape to a place free of difficulties and sorrows. 6 months later, my mother warned me not to throw a pity party since it would not bring back the things I had lost, including my daughter, but instead, it would take me directly to the morgue, and when that happens, I won't be able to fight or see my kid again. Those statements made me rethink my life. So, I utilized the money I had saved for my firm and received when I divorced to mend myself. I spent 6 months at the recovery clinic and attended AA meetings while there. By the time I got out, I was a completely different person. I had figured out what my worth was and what I sought. I began by requesting at least joint custody of my daughter, which I received by the grace of God. Then, I went through a severe depression for over a year, and I felt I was going to die. Everything was too much for me to bear. But there was one thing I was glad of having accomplished. I had saved myself from the greedy and selfish bastard. I was grateful that my mother came through for me when John was so close. My mother found me a therapist who made house calls, which I was happy for because I didn't want to face the world. I was concerned that John might notice me and tamper with my car tires this time. It was clear that he was completely obsessed with wrecking my life. I could not leave my daughter alone. The therapy sessions lasted months since I didn't always want to open up, but I eventually sought assistance and started to advocate for myself. John was sentenced to 25 years in jail for defrauding a Chicago businessman, and further accusations surfaced as the police investigation continued. I was pleased that he was finally away from me and my family, and I promised never to believe. I knew better. I promised to listen to my mother whenever she gave me warnings. After John was sentenced, I was free again. I became myself and chose to pursue my acting career seriously. I continued to work as a waitress on the side, but I never returned to my marital home. I stayed with my mother, and our lives were quite peaceful and happy. I realized that when I was with John, I had no idea what serenity and pleasure were since my love for him had blinded me. But today, I can confidently declare that I am free and at peace. I'm the person who set boundaries for myself and never let anyone or anything affect them. I lived my life for myself without seeking affirmation from others, but when I fell in love with John, everything changed. I lost me. I became his puppet and subservient wife. I followed his orders and did everything exactly as he requested, all because of love and commitment to the relationship, despite its toxic nature. But I stayed and clutched onto the hot steel, even though it began to burn my skin. It's not easy being in a relationship when you have to compromise yourself simply to make your lover happy. It's never worked like that. Some people would be startled to learn that I still adore my ex-husband and miss him every single day. My emotions urged me to fight for our connection and find a shared solution to the challenge, but why strive to help someone who doesn't need it? It was as if he were possessed by a commanding devil. So, when it came to actively managing him, he wanted to be in control as well. However, John resembled a person with multiple personality disorder, even though I couldn't confirm it. But the way he was doing things, with his manipulative and controlling tendencies, it appeared as if he was being driven by something or someone to do it in order to fulfill it. I regret not giving myself enough time to learn more about JN. I mean, we didn't take long to get married. If I'm not mistaken, they went from pals to boyfriend and girlfriend to husband and wife in less than a year. Everything occurred too quickly, and I was too engrossed in love to notice anything during our dating time. Please let me know if the decisions I made were good ones. I mean, half of my heart still loves the guy, while the other hates him fiercely. My daughter occasionally wants to visit him in jail, but I refuse since I do not want anything to do with John. What shall I do? Please tip me here since I am lost and unsure what to do. I want to hear from you, Redditus. What should I have done? So, yeah, I hoped he'd change and become the man I'd fallen in love with. I figured he'd ultimately recognize he was the one with the problem and try to fix it with me on his side as his wife. I had spoken with him extensively about his behavior and begged him to at least see a therapist so that he could receive whatever he needed and get treatment. Instead, he would brush everything aside and disregard my perspective as if it were nothing. However, based on my own understanding and perspective, I am unsure of what I was accomplishing. I'd say it was ungratefulness and a lack of patience with my hubby. I wish things had been done differently. Yes, it is too late, but I regret every idiotic decision I've made now. I've lost everything, and there's really just myself to blame. I'm not sure how I'm going to rectify anything and get forgiveness for myself. I knew everything shown that I did it willingly, even though I couldn't recall the following, but only God knows the truth. I had no idea that one joke would lead me to where I am now. Am I being foolish or naive if I say I miss John a lot? Does it mean our daughter misses him as well? I've considered paying him a visit in prison, but I'm not sure what I'll say when I arrive. Yes, I want him to be punished for being a fake and deceiving me and other people, but my heart still longs for him. I can't even tell my mother about this since I know she'll flip out when she learns about my inner desire. So, please assist me in determining how to approach both families regarding this situation. What do you think I should do? Please help me. Hello Reddit. I've always been a huge user of social media, so I think it's appropriate to publish about my issue here to ask and receive advice from you guys as well as to share my tale. I believe some people could benefit much from it, particularly those who are already cheating or want to cheat on their partner. I'm now in a difficult place and need assistance. My name is MIA, and I'm a 30-year-old woman. I've been married to Ethan, a 32-year-old man, for 6 years. We dated for 2 years before we married. We have 2 children, Lisa, who is 8 years old, and Nicholas, a 6-year-old boy. We live in South Lorena, United States. We are content with the small town we live in. My spouse grew up here, and his family is wealthy and well-connected. Ethan and I first met in an escape room. We clicked right away and became fast friends. There was simply a lovely spark between us. Many years have passed since our first date, and you know what? The flame between us is still alive. I am obsessed with my husband. He gets me, plays the father-husband role, and goes above and above for our children. A bedroom action? There are no complaints there, it's lively and wonderful. No, We make it a point to schedule date nights every weekend. We aren't drowning in responsibilities. Overall, a married life feels like a dream. But let's get real, we are far from perfect. He has things I wish he would change, and I have my own set of changes. Those eccentricities, however, are what make us a wonderful mess together. But here's the kicker, there was a tiny hitch. I botched up and began cheating. It's like a dark cloud hangs over our otherwise fantastic marriage. I was caught up in something messy at work, and I honestly don't know when or how it all happened. All I know is that I ended up having a relationship with a coworker. It's like a secret I came across without a distinct beginning. It's not like there was a great plan, it simply sort of occurred. Now I have to cope with the consequences. This whole thing began approximately 6 months ago when both my affair partner and I joined the company and started training at the same time. Even in those early days, something seemed amiss. I observed he was exceptionally nice, particularly with me. At first, I dismissed it, believing he was just a friendly person. The thing is, the more I tried to ignore it, the more friendly he became. It became this strange scenario with him being extra polite and me doing my best to downplay it. It was as if an unspoken tension was building up, causing a peculiar sensation that I couldn't escape no matter how hard I tried. My coworker Jason was an attractive and outgoing guy who everyone at work appeared to like. He had a reputation for being the entertaining person who always brought a pleasant spirit to the office. What astonished me, however, was his extra effort to be pleasant to me. He seemed to go out of his way, and I wasn't sure why. After a month or two, Jason applied to transfer to my department. That totally threw me off. I couldn't understand why he wanted to swap, especially since we had no specific initiatives or collaborations. Things grew more strange when we were both attending a co-worker's wedding. Jason, as usual, tried to dance with me. I had to put my foot down and reject, stating that it didn't feel right or appropriate given our working relationship. Jason's unwavering kindness was like a never-ending cycle. Whenever I encouraged him to calm down, he apologized, but the next day, he was back at it, attempting to get close to me. What's strange about it, I could have simply brought it up with HR, but to be honest, a part of me appreciated the attention. He had a talent for seeing everything about me and complimenting me, especially when I changed my appearance. It was a daily practice for him to commend me on things that my own spouse would not notice. It felt like someone had finally acknowledged my existence as entirely real. I started dressing up at work only to receive Jason's compliments. It became a bizarre cycle in which his attention filled a void, even though I knew something wasn't right. However, the day I eventually went all in with Jason occurred during a co-worker's birthday celebration. The workplace had a close-knit atmosphere, and we all got along well. We'd all receive invitations to any occasion, such as this co-worker birthday party. The atmosphere was relaxed, and everyone was having a nice time. It was one of those times when work boundaries blurred, and we could simply relax. Jason, true to form, was present, and the social situation made his charm more effective. The usual friendly banter took a turn, and I was quickly drawn into Jason's trap at the birthday party. Jason stuck to his routine, complimenting me on my appearance, which made me smile. As the night progressed, the drinks flowed freely, and before I knew it, I was more than tipsy. The specifics of when things changed with Jason are hazy, but I do recall that at the time, I was having fun. However, the fallout struck me hard the next day. I cheated on my husband, and regret flooded in. I made a solemn vow to avoid Jason. However, frustration and anger boiled within me, resulting in a heated confrontation in which I cursed him out and explicitly told him to stay away, in an effort to cut ties. I even blocked him, hoping to put an end to the situation that had spiraled out of control. I couldn't even admit to myself how much I enjoyed that moment with Jason. The days that followed were full of guilt. I reached a point where I couldn't bear the thought of going to work and meeting Jason. In my confusion, I called in sick and used it as an excuse to see Jason, as I was still embarrassed and angry. My husband, unaware, had inquired about the birthday party. I gave him the altered version, claiming that everything proceeded as usual and that I had become a touch tipsy. I conveniently left out the part where I got drunk, spent the night there, and texted him that I was going to stay at a friend's place to sober up. When he offered to pick me up, I declined, informing him that everything was fine. In reality, I stayed the night with Jason. That was not something my husband could recover from. Returning to work after those turbulent days away was difficult. I attempted to keep my distance from Jason, but that resolve only lasted for a brief period. Within a few days, he was back to being overly cordial, which hampered my attempts to keep a professional distance. He'd bring me coffee, get lunch for me during his break, and give me random smiles in an attempt to address the situation. Jason assured me it wasn't my fault but his. He apologized and told me not to worry, emphasizing that what my husband didn't know would not hurt him. His attempts to comfort me were unexpected but exactly what I needed. He even suggested I unblock him so we could communicate after work. You wouldn't be wrong to call me stupid or silly. I made a big mistake. Jason kept pushing, and against my better judgment, I unblocked him. The guy's texts were annoying but oddly comforting. He'd send good morning and good night texts, talk about his day, and keep claiming it wasn't my fault. He even suggested that we keep our relationship going without my husband knowing, and stupidly, I started buying into Jason's words. His texts, persistent as they were, messed with my head. On the one hand, I was irritated by his continuous communications, but on the other, I began to reconsider my own position. After all, what my husband didn't know would not hurt him. Jason didn't spend time getting past my defenses before I knew it. We were in the middle of a secret affair. Things were relatively easy to keep hush-hush since we worked together. We'd sneak off to the restroom during work hours for our secret meetups. I get it. It sounds silly now, but I was so caught up in the excitement that I completely overlooked how messed up everything was. To confuse my husband, I made up a story about wanting to advance my career, claiming that I'd be working longer hours. Despite his concerns about my stress, considering he earned more and could handle our bills, I convinced him not to stress. His improved salary also meant he had more time with the kids, which became beneficial while he played the responsible dad. I used the excuse of working additional hours to chill at Jason's apartment after work. We'd either wait for everyone to leave before our secret bathroom meetings or go straight to Jason's place. Looking back, it's evident that I was caught up in a web of lies and misplaced priorities. Jason had this knack for making me feel like I was the center of the universe, like I was the only one who truly mattered. I found myself smiling more and getting all pumped up to go to work. Sick days off work became a rarity. My husband saw my renewed zest for work and said he was glad I was happy, but he also pointed out the obvious: I was ignoring the kids. He was right, but back then, I was oblivious to it all. I started tuning out from parenting responsibilities, leaving all the child care to my husband. Even when I was home, I'd hole up in our study, pretending to be engrossed in work when in reality, I was deep into texting Jason. The kids started to voice their complaints, wanting more time with me. I'd brush it off, explaining that mommy needed to work. This lasted for weeks, and my co-workers began to notice the difference. Jason and I were suddenly closer, and I wasn't giving him the cold shoulder anymore. I even went to the extent of leaving my car at home sometimes so Jason could give me a ride back to his apartment. Looking back, I realized how dumb that was. Anyone could have seen me sitting in Jason's car, and someone did see me. LOL. But at the time, I thought it was some romantic move. The entire situation had me caught up in a cloud of rash decisions and misguided romantic ideals. There were several indicators, almost like the cosmos itself was attempting to send me warnings to put the brakes on this whole situation. Looking back, it's evident that these danger flags were strewn throughout my voyage. However, I foolishly chose to ignore them. The first signs came in the form of my own shame, a persistent emotion that should have served as a warning. Then there were the moments of hesitation, those small pauses before responding to Jason's texts when I may have reassessed my actions. Even my kids' complaints and my husband's concerns served as glaring indicators that something was amiss. As if that wasn't enough, my co-workers began to notice the shift in dynamics between Jason and me, and the unsafe conduct of leaving my car behind only to take a ride with him was a clear indicator. It's almost comical how the universe threw these warning signs my way, and yet, in the whirlwind of emotions, I remained oblivious to the impending storm. It's a realization that hindsight often delivers. The universe had been dropping hints, trying to redirect my course. In my stubbornness or perhaps sheer ignorance, I chose to disregard these indications, only because I liked the pleasure of my affair with Jason. My husband's sister once spotted me sitting shotgun in Jason's car while driving through traffic. It's a miracle she never told my spouse, or maybe she just forgot, as she seems to do sometimes. Another possibility is that she thought she must have been mistaken since I managed to pull off a quick covert duck when I spotted her. That moment could have blown the lid off the entire affair, but luck was on my side, and the secret remained safe. Everything seemed like a typical workday until it all hit the fan. Jason and I were our usual flirty selves at work, sneaking off to the restroom for a quick intimate session during lunch. He brought me food, and we chatted like any other day. We planned to go to his place after work, so I messaged my husband, informing him I'd be working overtime for a few extra hours. He was cool with it, already home and ready to monitor the kids. Perfect, right? Jason was waiting for me when I walked to the parking lot after finishing work. A few co-workers stopped to speak, and one even inquired whether everything was good between Jason and myself. I constructed this yarn about how we'd become better friends when I realized it was wrong to give him the cold shoulder. She seemed doubtful but didn't press further, just nodding and letting the conversation wind up. Now, it's crucial to emphasize that I knew Jason wasn't exactly Mr. Clean in the lifestyle category. He had a thing for drugs but was a functional addict. If you weren't really tight with him, you wouldn't assume it. The dude looked amazing, stayed fit, and had this bright vibe that didn't scream drug junkie. But here's the real kicker: Jason wasn't only interested in using, he also dabbled in dealing, and he kept a stash at his apartment. He tried to get me on the cannabis train once, but it wasn't my thing, so I got off it quickly and never tried it again. LOL. I finished conversing with the coworker and went to meet Jason in the parking lot. We were hungry and decided to stop by McDonald's for some takeout. After getting burgers and fries, we went to Jason's apartment. Once there, we ate our food and watched a movie as part of our customary routine. Then, we started getting intimate. Things took a crazy turn when we were startled in the middle of our intimacy by a hammering on the door. Turns out, it was the cops, and I began hurrying to get dressed. But Jason pushed me to calm down, assuring me that they probably didn't even have a warrant to search him, perhaps they only had a few questions. He added we grudgingly opened the door only to be promptly arrested. Shocked is an understatement. They displayed a warrant and proceeded to raid Jason's residence, discovering not only cannabis but also some severe drugs. Both of us ended up in handcuffs. But here's the kicker: as they dragged me away, they revealed that it was more than simply the pills. Oh no, they felt I was working with Jason and labeled me as a dealer. And if that wasn't enough, they included adultery and infidelity. The shock struck me like a freight train. Infidelity? My thoughts raced as my spouse reported me. Did he know about the affair? Living in South Lorena, where the penalties against infidelity are serious, added another depth of dread. Fines and perhaps days in jail were on the table, and the last thing I wanted was to end myself in jail. In a frantic attempt, I tried to explain to the police officer that I was unaware of Jason's criminal activities. However, my appeals went unheard since the officer insisted on waiting until we arrived at the police station before hearing me out. So reluctantly, I kept quiet throughout the voyage. When we arrived at the police station, they separated Jason and me and took us to different rooms for intensive questioning. Overwhelmed with passion, I burst into tears and told the police officer the truth. I admitted that I was married and had cheated on my spouse with Jason. I made it apparent that Jason was completely aware of my marital status. However, when it came to the drug issue, I chose to lie. I informed the police that I had no knowledge Jason was connected with narcotics. I never took anything from him, and he never told me about his drug peddling operations. My tears streamed freely as I confessed. I insisted on having my lawyer present, recognizing that they could not detain me without filing charges. The officers informed me that I was free to leave, However, they strongly advised me to get legal representation, emphasizing that their probe would continue. They also mentioned that I would be asked to testify against Jason in court. Of course, to save myself, I quickly agreed. As I was going to leave, one of the cops approached me and planted a bomb. My spouse had snitched on me and given them Jason's address. They stated they wouldn't normally spill the beans, but my spouse asked that they inform me to rub salt in the wound. They informed me that I was no longer allowed at home due to my cheating methods. I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying again. The cops were not particularly attentive to my tears. Their expressions indicated an obvious disgust for my immorality. Despite their judgment, I vowed to return and ask my husband's forgiveness, so I got into a taxi and went home. But let's get real, what was I actually expecting when I arrived? I discovered all of my things neatly arranged on the front porch, of frigid and unfriendly welcoming to say the least. Devastated, I knocked on the door, but no one answered. To say I was heartbroken is an understatement. I stood there crying for hours, but it was clear that either they were purposefully ignoring me or they weren't home. With no other options, I had to pack my belongings and seek safety in a motel for the night. I couldn't even return to Jason's flat because he'd already barred me. They had released him, but it was evident he was being investigated and could end up in jail. I'm sitting in my hotel room and feel completely lost. The gravity of the situation has me in utter anguish, and I've been crying for hours with no idea what to do next. My spouse attempted to contact Ethan but was met with nothing. He does not answer my phone calls or texts. Reaching out to my in-laws, Ethan's parents, has proven useless because they refuse to answer the phone. My family resides in another state, and the distance makes it difficult to seek comfort with them right away. I'm hesitant to fly tomorrow because my priority is to mend my marriage with Ethan while also working. I can't just leave. What do you think I should do, Reddit? Please help with the update. Wow, okay, it's been a month since I posted that post, and I never anticipated it to become viral like this. I've received several DMs asking for an update, so I suppose I owe you one. So here's what has happened since. First of all, living in a hotel for a month, no matter how affordable, proved to be a financial hardship. I've had to swap hotels twice in quest of less expensive options. Furthermore, the terrible reality has been apparent: Ethan and I are getting a divorce. After a few weeks of his quiet, I hit a breaking point and texted Ethan a sincere plea for him to act like an adult and communicate with me. Thankfully, he eventually yielded, breaking the ice and responding to me. We scheduled a meeting at a neutral location, a restaurant. It was disappointing to see that he did not bring the children, but I understood his need for prudence and lack of trust. The entire interaction was stomach-wrenching when he asked why I had done it. I couldn't come up with any excuses. The weight of his disappointment was heartbreaking. He told me I broke his heart. Ethan admitted that he was the one who phoned the cops on Jason. I said I knew because the cops had informed me at the station. Ethan explained that he had told the cops to inform me because he had originally planned to cut all ties with me. I couldn't help but ask how he knew about Jason's drug activity, but Ethan merely stated that he had sources. When I questioned him how he discovered my infidelity, he said he found out in a variety of ways. He had seen my text exchanges with Jason and had even taken screenshots. He also claimed to have heard it from people around town, including some of my co-workers who approached him. I was crushed. I couldn't stop crying. All I could say on repeat was, "I'm so sorry. I love you. I never intended for this to happen." But he was no longer buying it. The trust was gone. Ethan stated that he wanted a divorce for our mental well-being. I broke down even more because he made it apparent that he couldn't get over what I'd done. The lies I told him just made matters worse. He put it all out, explaining how he managed everything at home, babysitting and looking after the kids while I lied about working late and spending time with Jason. My marriage was ruined as a result of the mess I made. Ethan laid it on me. He had been carrying a lot more weight and earning more than me, taking on all responsibility. That didn't bother him in the least. He reminded me of my absence from the children. I was completely absorbed in my own universe with Jason. Ethan admitted that he'd known about it for a time. I hoped to change, but I never did. He acknowledged that he believed I would not have stopped if he hadn't called the police. It seemed like a reality check and a wake-up call. Ethan closed the door on forgiveness, telling me it would never happen. He informed me that my divorce papers were on their way. He wanted custody of the children because he had proof that I was frequently absent from their life. He asked where I was currently staying, and I told him it was a motel. He taunted me for crashing in a motel and asked why I wasn't staying with Jason, which made me cry even more. He then informed me that he was removing the funds from our joint account. I couldn't protest because it was mostly his money, but he promised to give me enough to get by for a few weeks. Ethan said he'd text me once the divorce papers were ready. When I asked about the kids, he said we could meet up next weekend. Despite the fact that I had harmed him, he pledged not to keep me from seeing them. But he made it clear that I was responsible for resolving issues with the children, and that they had grown apart while I was away. I couldn't deny that Ethan was telling the truth, and the consequences of my own actions hit me hard. After our heartfelt talk, Ethan left. He even paid for our drinks at the restaurant and tipped the waitress. I'm still waiting for those divorce papers. When they arrive, I won't fight. I know I deserve it all, and I'll sign them without complaint. It's the least I can do after everything that happened. Let's just say that Jason has become a ghost in my life. I haven't seen or talked to him in a while, and to be honest, I don't care about his fate anymore. I am still expecting a call from the cops, and when the time comes, I will testify against him without hesitation. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.